Welcome, everybody. Happy Friday. We are so incredibly excited that you have joined us for Zeitgeist's Spirit of the Time, episode 20, with the legendary, iconic, amazing, influential Joe Rohde. So excited to have him with us today. We will get started right at 12 o'clock. Enjoy the slideshow. Welcome to those just joining us to Zeitgeist Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. We are on our 20th episode already, and we are so excited to have you here on this Friday as we are going to take Joe Rohde on a time travel journey.
And don't drink during the show. No, you don't.
Welcome, everybody who's just joining us. Thank you so much. We will get started right at 12, and we are so happy to have you guys today.
Is the timer set?
For those of us just joining us, thank you so much. Welcome to Zeitgeist Spirit of the Time, episode 20 with Joe Rohde. We will get started right at the top of the hour. Thank you to everyone joining us today. We are going to get started momentarily. Welcome to Zeitgeist Spirit of the Time Zoomcast.
Yeah, no.
All right, and welcome to Zeitgeist Design and Production. I'm Becky Kiefer, Studio Director. Time travel is the ultimate immersive experience. VR, AR, and the metaverse pale in comparison to the notion of sailing across the seas of time. And here in the Zeitgeist Creative Studio, aka R&J's Time Travel Emporium, imagination rules and time is always of the essence. This is where location-based entertainers Ryan Harmon and Joe Lancicero study the past and spin the present, envisioning the future of UXIRL, user experiences in real life. The Spirit of the Time Zoomcast offers a sneak peek behind the themes, and each month we move you without a ride system, inviting one incredibly talented and influential colleague aboard our time machine. We set our controls for milestone moments in that person's career and attempt to unravel the mystery of what makes a guest experience timely yet timeless. And because we're live, you can type questions into the chat box and our passenger will answer them in an off-the-record Q&A just after the hour. Climbing aboard our time machine today is a man who comes from very humble beginnings and evolved through innate artistic talent, articulate and persuasive vision, and the exotic look of a hippie adventurer to become one of the most celebrated experience designers of our time, Mr. Joe Rohde. Hypnotized by the pendulum-like motion of his many earrings, audiences around the world know Joe as the former Disney Imagineer responsible for such beloved parks and attractions as Disney's Animal Kingdom, Expedition Everest, Disney's Aulani Resort, Guardians of the Galaxy, Cosmic Rewind, and Pandora, the World of Avatar, just to name a few. It's now my pleasure to introduce our time machine pilots. Zeitgeist President and Chief Creative Officer, Ryan Harmon, and Zeitgeist Executive Vice President and Chief Art Director, Joe Lancicero, along with a man who true life adventures provided eligibility to become one of just 3,500 worldwide members of the esteemed Explorers Club, Joe Rohde.
Whoa. Wow, that was a hard landing.
Well, today we're back. We just did a quick trip back 2 years, almost 3 years now, that we've been doing these Zoomcasts.
Yeah.
I can't believe how many incredible people we've had
Yep.
along the way.
Yep.
We went all the way back to Tom Morris.
I know. I was so much better back then.
And I had more hair, but nobody knows that. Anyway, what a great trip it's been. All the amazing people we've had, all the learnings along the way.
Yes.
But today I think we're in for the ultimate schooling because we have Professor Rohde on here. During my time in Imagineering, I never had the opportunity to go on one of these incredible trips with Joe. So I'm super excited about today, and we got a lot to cover. So we should probably get right into it.
Hello, Joe. Thank you for joining us today.
So incredible to have you.
Episode 20. And for those of you who haven't been to a journey to, what do we call it?
Spirit of the Time.
Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. Check out our website, check out our YouTube channel. There's 19 other episodes with awesome people. You will learn so much about them in the industry.
But this one will eclipse them all.
This is the best.
Okay, all right.
So let's get
The picture's not on, John.
Let's set the controls. We're going to go to about 1960, and we're on the Oahu Island of Hawaii. We're overlooking Waikiki, and there you are playing in the grasses. What is going on here?
So if it's 1960 and it's Waikiki, I am almost certainly face down in the water, snorkeling along in the coral, looking for little fish. I grew up in an old, really rather decrepit kind of estate building house on a piece of property just above Waikiki in a neighborhood called Makiki. And we would go straight down to mostly Waikiki Beach. That was our beach. But back in the day, it was not what it is today. That's where I would be.
Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit to 1966, and we've crossed the ocean. Where are we?
So by 66, we're in LA. My dad was a cinematographer, and so we kind of followed work. And he had gotten a job on the film Planet of the Apes, the original.
Cool.
Yeah. And so that provided enough of a foothold back in California for the family to move back. We lived in Van Nuys, and then for quite a few years, my dad worked on exactly the kind of film and TV shows that if you were a boy of that age, you would want your dad to work on. like science fiction, Gene Roddenberry stuff, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, which no
So
one
jealous.
Lost in Space, which people have heard of.
Yeah.
And he worked on Lancer, which no one has heard of, except that it is featured in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh,
okay.
cool. Okay.
Okay, so your dad's a big movie guy. You have a lot of money here and living in Van
No,
Nuys?
you know, we had medical expenses as a family going way back. And so we never had, we lived in this house in Hawaii because it was decrepit, because we could afford it. So we always were kind of struggling for money. I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I didn't grow up with, like a lot of people who grow up without a lot of means. I didn't grow up with a very deep horizon of what I could do, right? You're constantly just dealing with what can be done. So even though he worked in the movies and that was very exotic and, you know, all very, it was a very rich environment for me to go be in when I could be there. It wasn't like nowadays where, you know, you're living in the Hollywood Hills somewhere. We lived behind a medical center in Van Nuys.
Wow. So dad was a cameraman and mom was?
My mother started out as an actress, and by the time we moved here, she was teaching. She would teach voice, she would teach theater and acting, and she had been in school at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts with all kinds of famous people, with Marlon Brando, Don Rickles, Grace Kelly, kind of that era.
Wow.
Okay.
So there was no getting around. You were surrounded by creativity.
Yeah.
So
well, yeah, I grew up in a house. A lot of people have to break with their family just in order to pursue a career in the arts, right? They want you to be a doctor, they want you to be a lawyer, they want you to go into business somehow. Right. I at least grew up in a household where the premise that you were going to be creative, that you're going to do something arty or artful was accepted as okay, you might do that. We're certainly not going to stop you from doing that. And of course, you know, my dad could teach me how to storyboard. My mom could teach me about dramatic timing and theater. So you kind of had a natural bias, I guess, in the household.
And what were your friends like? Did you hang out with?
You know, when I went from being a nerdy little kid to kind of a troublemaking kid. So in the junior high frame of time, I was hanging around with pretty rough company. And I wasn't as bad as my friends, but my friends were like stealing motorcycles. So they were, I wasn't doing that, but I was going to eventually, you know, you're going to have to pay the price, right? You're going to have to belly up. So I was like, I got to get out of here. They're going to find out that I'm going to the library every week and reading books. And my parents are also like, we got to get this kid out of here because he's slipping into darkness. And so we both kind of mutually decided I need to get out of there. I ended up in a Catholic boys' school called Chaminade Preparatory High School. At the time, it was all boys. Now it is no longer so. And it was the kind of school at the time that you might send kids to, boys who needed a little more structure. You know, but it also at the same time was becoming kind of this odd, almost Montessori high school, very open classroomy kind of place, which ended up being great for me. It was great.
Wow. So tell us about Father Oyabu.
Oh yeah. So we had all these the teachers were really, I thought they were great teachers. At one of them, Father Oyabu had been an ex-Zen monk. Now he was a Catholic priest. He used to still do Zen archery. We used to tease him by talking to him in Irish voices, like Father Oyabu with an apostrophe, like, oh, Father Oyabu, how are things on the old God? So I got a great education. I got like a really good liberal arts education out of this. And this has relevance because really from a pretty early age, even if you go back to the troublemaking time, I'm getting into trouble with my friends, but I'm going to the library every week and checking out as many books as I can carry and staying up till like 3 a.m. reading these big books. Wow. Then I'm in this sort of open classroomy, very liberal artsy, learny kind of high school. So I early on have kind of a bias towards thinking, philosophy, and analytics, that kind of thing. It's pretty early twist in the plot.
Wow. Okay, so you had you were dared to design
Yeah.
Tempest.
So this is one of these
Like a high school
in
thing.
my life, right? I mean, even though, you know, my mom was in theater and my dad was in film, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, I sort of saw myself as a kind of an artist. And I started this school, you know, this boys' school, and the guy who was in charge of the theater department, you have to picture me in a black leather jacket with kind of greasy hair and very, very funky black shoes. The guy who's in charge of the drama department comes up to me and he literally says, "I hear you think you're an artist." And I said, "Yeah, I think I can draw." He goes, "Do you think you could design a set?" And I looked at him and I said, "Well, what do you think you guys can build?" And he leans way in at me and he goes, "You just design it, kid. We'll build it."
Wow.
I was like, "Oh, really? Okay." So I went, and my very first set design was for the Tempest.
Yeah.
And it was about a 15-foot tall rotating mountain based on the principle of the periactoi, with scrim walls and a door for Ariel to appear through that was held together by flash paper. And they built it. And I helped build it, and I ended up playing Caliban. And so then I was in. I was like, okay, this is cool. You know, you can design, there's a team, you build things. So once again, very early, I'm like 14, right?
Wow.
You get into this thing of like, there's a show, there's a set, there's a budget, there's materials, there's a crew, there's an audience, they pay money, they want to see something, right? Really early on in my developmental pattern is the principles way before, you know, just that's to me almost is what art was, is this is what we do. We do it like this.
Yeah.
So you talked about that made you an information-based designer.
Yeah, content. I'm not actually really a physical appearance-based designer. I'm a content-based designer. Appearance manifests content. And I talk about it like when you put on a play, especially a play people know, like a Shakespeare play. Everybody knows Shakespeare, right? So you take something like, I don't want to take too much of your time, but let's just say Hamlet, right? You're going to do Hamlet. We've seen Hamlet. We know the plot. Everybody dies. It's not a big surprise, right? So a director is going to say something like, yeah, we're going to do Hamlet, but Hamlet is really about like failed parental father figures. It's about the failure of hypermasculinity. I mean, look at Hamlet's father sends him to his death. He's a ghost. The king is like a drunkard. He's a failed father of the state. Polonius, you know, is having his kids spy on Hamlet. They both die. There's no good father figure in this thing. It's like an overbearing. So you go, oh, well, that just sounds like a man cave, like an overbearing, massive, heavy man cave with velvet and columns and giant furniture, and everything's masculine and giant and heavy, but that's going to cost a fortune, fortune. Right. So maybe that's not what Hamlet is about. Maybe Hamlet is about surveillance, because Hamlet is watching the king is watching Hamlet, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are watching Hamlet, Polonius is watching his kids, the kids are watching Hamlet. Everybody talks about how the state of Denmark is watching them. So how about instead, there's no set, we do the thing in street clothes, we ask the entire audience to film the production while it's happening and post the images to a site, and the backdrop is just posting of the audience observing the show under surveillance. We can afford to do that. So that's what Hamlet is about. Right? So that's not the surface. That's the story. What is it about? And from an early stage, that's kind of how my mind was wired.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, let's set the time machine now in 1973.
You're going to college.
Yeah, I go to college.
With
I applied
Obama?
to one college because I have no money. There is no money. There's no money, right? So if I'm going to get into a college, it's going to be because there's scholarships and grants and work programs, and this is the one that had that. So Occidental College, also, it's not far away, so I don't have to worry about cost of living. Occidental College, a fantastic college, a great liberal arts college. I got a great liberal arts education there, met one of my best friends, met my wife, and I stayed in theater, but I stopped performing. It really was the moment in my life when I'm like, I'm not gonna be an actor. That's not a thing. I'm gonna design. And that all happened in that period of time.
But those acting skills have served you well through your career.
Acting is it's great training because you're trained in empathy, you're trained in observation, and you're trained in this idea that there's some interior thing going on, right? Acting is, again, not a superficial performance. What you are performing is what's going on inside. That's acting, right? And so a lot of what we do as Imagineering with built sets is very much like method acting with built material.
Wow.
So 1978, you graduate and you're going to be a high school teacher.
Yeah, I'm teaching back at the same high school I went to. Once again, I get out of school. I need a job. I need a job right now, right? There is no safety net. So I get this job teaching art back at my high school for very little money because teachers don't make money, but at least I had some money. And I was teaching, and I happened to be teaching the children of one of the Disney executives, a guy named John Zovich, who was, I think, VP of engineering.
Was it Kate that you were teaching? His daughter?
Say again?
Was it his daughter, Kate?
Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
there's others too.
Okay.
So anyway, so I was teaching, and he comes into my office one day and he's like, "You're wasting your time here, son. You should be working at Disney Imagineering." And I have hair and, I'm a hippie person. I'm like, there's no way the Disney company is going to hire me to do anything. They wouldn't even let me in the park back in the 60s. It's not a thing, right? So this goes on a couple of years. I keep teaching. And meanwhile, I'm apprenticing in the Scenic Artists Guild because I figured that's a job, production. I'll be a production designer. I'll be a scenic artist, an art director. That's where that path leads. But then you're like, man, I gotta do something more close to what I'm doing, right? Yeah. So I go back and ask if that offer is still open. And he's, yeah. So I put together what I now realize is a really pathetic portfolio. And I present it. I built a model, nothing Disney in it. I don't know from Disney. I never visualized I was going to be working at Disney. I never heard of Imagineering until this guy walks in my office, right? Never heard of it. And so I put together this elaborate fantasy model, like half-inch scale set, like interior of a castle with all the carving and murals coming to life, and this little half-inch scale knight in wonder looking at it. And then, of course, drawing and sketching, blah, blah, blah. But honest to God, I'm sure that I only got the job because he scribbled "hire him" across my, application. So I got a job in the model shop at Walt Disney Imagineering, and I walked in the door in probably 1st of August of 80.
Yeah.
So interesting that you really weren't one of those Disney geeks or Disney fans. You didn't grow up, watching the cartoons, drawing Mickey Mouse, all those things that people think are so, typical and necessary to, become part of that world.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, this is a long time ago, right? Even the first generation of Disney artists are not Disney fans. I mean, they came from somewhere, right?
Right, exactly.
And so, but it's true. I didn't hate the Disney company. I watched the movies and things like anybody would, but it wasn't like I had this target in my mind. It wasn't one of those people, and which was a disadvantage when you walk in the door in a certain sense, because I didn't know very much at all. But also, and you guys might remember this from back then, the people who were walking around there did not define themselves as theme park designers.
Yeah, right.
They claimed to be production designers, architects, art directors, sound designers. That's when you ask them what they were, that's what they would tell you they were. So I could identify with that. Okay, I'm like these guys. I'm kind of like an art director, not yet, but I'm a model builder, but I will be an art director, not I will be a theme park designer. Didn't even occur to me that that's what I was going to be, because it didn't occur to me that I was going to stay there for 40 years. Like many people, I thought I was going to be there for 3 years, the magic number that many Imagineers claim they were only going to stay.
But I think it's that very point that made what you did so unique. And so what a lot of came out of that period too. I was talking with Joe a little earlier about, you know, I came from animation, and there was kind of a ghetto of thought there. You know, everybody kind of, they all loved the Disney movies, and they all kind of had the kind of the same style. But when you got to Imagineering, you were surrounded by theater people, by, you know, architects, by movie people, TV people, you know, and it was this diversity of thought. And like you said, no one found themselves as a theme park designer. We were taking these collective skills and together creating this new thing, which was absolutely.
And I believe that's what made it new. What made it new is that, and because it felt fantastically vital to be there. It was super intimidating. Especially to me. I don't know anything.
So Joe, I got to tell you, intimidating. You were part of that intimidation, believe it or not, for me. So I arrived from animation, and at that time, the model shop was filled with all kinds of show designers and special effects people. And I don't even know if you remember this. They put me on a little, you know, on a slab of plywood with two sawhorses, but right across from me in the corner, there's this pile of African masks and all this crazy shit. I go, oh my God, what's all this about? I draw cartoons, and it was you, and you were just getting all this, your amazing props and things for the famous Adventurers Club.
That is true. That's true. That took a little while to get to that point. I mean, I got mentored up. You know, I got into production. I got out of building models because I was terrible, truly terrible. Right. And I was like, if I stay in this position, they will fire me. I would fire me. Right. And I just got lousier and lousier model type jobs that I didn't care. They're paying me money. They're paying me a living wage to cut pieces of wood into little squares and spray paint them gray all day long. This is heaven.
Well, tell us for a minute about, at that time, a lot of artists were not, you know, illustrious entertainment industry people after World War II.
Oh, that's a whole other thing. There's this whole, you got to remember, there's a vibe. These older artists who we were around, the famous ones, Herb Ryman, you know, Colin Campbell. These guys are tough. They're tough. There's a way in which the Disney vibe wants to soften all that stuff and sweeten things. But imagine if you were born in the early part of the 20th century as a guy, especially, and you announce that you want to go be an artist. This is a lifelong fight. Your friends are going to make fun of you. You're going to get beat up. There's no money in it. You're going to go live in some rough part of town, frankly, with criminals and prostitutes. You're going to struggle. You have to be tough, right? These guys were under the surface. They were like this. They had stories that were like, here, and I'm growing up in the 60s, right? And I'm listening to these guys, you know, at martini lunch talking about stuff going, man, I have never done that. Probably will never do that. And yet this gave them, this is why that creativity, conservative people are scared by creativity, and they should be, because this is where it comes from. It's a scary thing. You're going to change things. You're going to mess things up. That's how you're going to be creative. You're going to break something, and then you're going to make something. And so that is an important thing. But, you know, I needed to learn the making part of this, right? And so that took some years. I had very, very good mentors. I mean, I studied illustration with Herb Ryman. Harper Goff taught me how to do those measured tilt-up, you know, those scaled tilt-up sketches.
Wow.
Rick Rothschild advocated for me, Richard Vaughn, Chris Carradine, and this guy, Bob Criswell, who most people, I don't think he's like a famous Imagineer, but he was a fantastic teacher. And so eventually, it was Rick Rothschild who asked me to design the Adventurers Club. Now, I had had a fair amount of theatrical experience with immersive theater. There was a big wave of immersive theater at the time. I had been involved with the Renaissance Fair. I had mounted my own immersive theatrical parties and things. And so I went about this project, the project you mentioned, you know, with the idea that it would be like that, that you would be more like what we now commonly do. There isn't exactly a script. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. You're inside the show. You can't tell quite what's real. We were back in the day, we were sampling the audience by having conversations with them. The actors would talk to you, right? Yeah. And then they would disappear in a door that led inside a wall. And then you don't know that there's a hollow wall, right? And then suddenly a mask on the wall comes to life, which you think is audio animatronic, but it's not. It's puppeted by that actor who's now using a different voice and is talking to you like he knows you because he was talking to you like 5 minutes, right? So it's this weird, and then the weird authentic slash, it's like a fantasy place, but everything's real. All those statues are real. This directly connects eventually to Animal Kingdom. It's a blend of what is real and what is not real and what could be real. Yeah, so you get lost. You can't edit. So you're in there going, I don't know, I guess it's real. I guess it's real, right? Yeah. And I think that's why the Adventurers Club has such a following, is because people got into this state of like, this is like real. This is my club. It is a club. Yeah. This is really happening right now. It didn't happen last night. It's happening to me. It's happening now. It's something real. I'm a member of this club. And what made the Adventurers Club work, as much as all that stuff that I piled up was really cool, made the Adventurers Club work was the club of the club. The inclusion, the welcoming, the fact that you were brought inside the story, you were treated with honor, you were given a role, you didn't have to take that role. That whole upstairs balcony was for all those people like me who are like, don't come up to me and start talking to me in some character voice. I just want to sit here and have a drink. I'm that guy. So I would be sitting up here going, no. I don't want to stand up and do a funny dance. I'm just going to have my drink and right. So the club was designed so people could manage their own dial. If I stay upstairs, no one will do anything to me. If I go into that big room, there's all kinds of big group things that happen. And if I go into those little rooms, someone is going to sit on my lap. It was very clear you could set the dial yourself. Yeah. Anyway.
So yeah, and that I think that illustrates that one of the key tenets of a lot of what Disney did, this idea, the suspension of disbelief, that you created this place that allowed people, like, because you had those real world touch points but they got themselves invested in the stories in this world, but they felt safe being there. I didn't have to get on a plane and go to some exotic place, but I'm getting this incredibly exotic night and I'm safe and I'm drinking my cocktail. And that is, I think, the essence of so much of what you did. You created those touch points, but then allowed people to feel safe in an exotic
and it was immersive.
Yeah,
it was one of the.
And there's a thing about that. It's willful suspension of disbelief, not forced suspension of disbelief, which means you need an out. You need an out. Yeah. It's willful suspension of disbelief. Yeah. I'm not fooling you. I'm not fully immersing you. I'm not. You have an out so that it is willful suspension of disbelief. Otherwise, it's not play. It is deception, right? Yeah. So you have to remember you're in a state of play. And in a state of play, I can stop. I can say, oh yeah, okay, too much. I want to play like this. I want to do this. Yeah. Whereas if you go too far, especially with the seduction of very, very realistic immersive environments, it can become forced suspension of disbelief. That is not necessarily pleasant.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you, Professor Rohde. Now
wait, we got a little too far though. Let's go back to 84. Imagineering changed its name from Wet Enterprises to Walt Disney Imagineering.
And we have a change of the guard. Yeah, we have Michael Eisner comes in.
Wells, what was really
so right about this time, so I'd gone through this progression, right? Of like, okay, I'm a model builder, suck at that. I got to get into 2D work. So I got into doing the color boards. Color boards led to doing all the black light painting for the models. That led into full-scale production, which I was very familiar with, been doing since I was 14. Yeah. And then that's a dead end. They're like, uh-oh, I'm stuck. I got to get out of this channel or I get laid off when everybody gets laid off. So I backed into concept illustration. Concept illustration is what landed me with Bob Kurzweil as a mentor, working with Tony Baxter. And concept illustration eventually had me in the concept room, where all that stuff from what by then was a decade ago, all that liberal artsy stuff finally has value. You can think about stuff. You can put 3 ideas together. You can articulate clearly. You can mount an idea that is convincing. You have a reference book in your head. You know, now that has value. I'm in the concept room. So I had become the talking guy. I was now the talking guy. Oh, you stand up and you do it. You stand up and talk about it. You talk, even to the point where I was hired by teams I was not working on as the concept guy.
Wow.
Let us present the concept to you, and then you present it, right?
Right.
But I'm still just some little junior hermit crab person. You know, I'm not a person. I'm not a guy. I'm not famous. I'm not any of those things.
Right.
And I end up in presentations with Michael Eisner. I end up in a very particular presentation relative to Splash Mountain before it had a name, when it was still the Song of the South ride. And Michael did not want it to have that name. And I was in the room, and I ended up in the room alone to kind of explain this idea. Like, you know, you can't just, he wanted to call it, he's the one who wanted to call it Splash Mountain. It was his idea, right? But he wanted to call it that because he wanted to put the Daryl Hannah mermaid on it. So you could market that, right? And my job then, because I'm a total sacrificial lamb, is go tell him he can't do that.
Okay.
So, of course, now it's easy to imagine because now everybody knows that I'm just a compulsive college professor. You have to be an old guy before you're ever alone in a room with a person of authority,
Right.
But not in Hollywood. I could easily be some famous person he hadn't heard of, some young somebody. So he treats me like some kind of equal in the room. And I do my rap about this is how it works. This is the plot. This is the, you know, theme parks. These are stories. They're structures like a film. You know, you can't just stick Macbeth inside Brigadoon because it's in Scotland. You can't, you know, there's rules. And he was very, very receptive. And very much like, oh, thank you very much for explaining that. I get it. I totally get it. I still would love to change the name. You know, of course, I have no power. And then he's like, call me on Monday. Like, I cannot call you on Monday. Go, no, just call my office on Monday. Go, read my lips now. I cannot call you on Monday or some other day. He goes, look, I am the president of the company. I told you to call me on Monday. Call my office on Monday. Call his office and then some other idea. And, you know, so I ended up in this weird relationship with both Michael Eisner and Frank Wells. It was not at all appropriate for my station within the company,
Right.
Which only helped with the, oh, it's the talking guy. Make Joe do the talking. He can do the talking because they will listen to Joe because he will talk. And so this lubricated the ability to present ideas.
Right.
Is a little bit like a home court advantage. It's a little weird thing that I could maybe get away with being more aggressive. I could get away with being more outrageous. I could get away with taking chances a little bit, I think, so that I could present weird ideas and get it at least said, you know.
So Joe, I remember you were very much a part of opening my mind to how ideas were king at Imagineering, because I had only been there for a short time, and we didn't even talk about this. There was a project, the Burbank project, and I remember you standing up and pitching. This was, I guess, to the general, you know, WDIP, you know, group there, pitching all these like really crazy ideas, like this mistake house. I remember that just stood out in my, I mean, this, I go, wow, this is not, you know, Peter Pan. This is not, I mean, these are like really big ideas, you know. Now, unfortunately, it didn't happen. But my point is that, you know, you and that group were like pushing things. And for me, young, I came from animation. It's like, wow, this is way more than, what was happening, in the world of, coming up with the next, Pinocchio ride.
Yeah.
We did have this little group of people that were working on, I mean, some of those ideas were delightfully surrealistic.
Yes.
Fantastically surrealistic ideas. Oh my God, so many of them, so weird, so interesting. But remember, part of that is I'm not well grounded in Disney mythology. I don't know the canon very well. So the classic core people, they don't need me on their team. That's a person they're paying for who can't contribute very much to the conversation. So I better find some work, right? So this was high risk work. As you said, it didn't get done. It paid the bills for a year while we worked on it, but it did not get done. So it's high risk. That again colored the arc of my decision making, because you kind of get used to high risk. I mean, I don't know, is this ever going to get done? I don't know, but is it a good idea? That I do know. Right. There are 1,000 reasons why something might not get done, and only one of them is it's not a good idea. There are many other reasons not to do something. So focus on making it really, really good. Focus on what you can control. Can you control the quality of your proposition? Then control that, right? You can't control the other guy. They have a million reasons why they're not going to do it. Something you will never know. Some massive corporate change that's going to happen in 3 days that you're never going to know. They're never telling you, right? Something they're going to spend money on that's way more important than your proposal for a new thing that goes in a circle and has a popping sound. Nobody cares, right? Because they're about to spend $7 billion and they're not telling you, right? You got to work on what you can control. So this was great for me. It was really good. It was good that I did so many of these things, because we're working on the quality of the proposal, the quality of the idea, and the way that you can demonstrate this is a quality idea. So if you choose not to do it, it's not because it's a bad idea.
Right. Yeah. So let's move to 1987, and it looks like you're going to Japan, and this is a trip that's going to impact your life.
That's the earrings. So by now, of course, I am the talking guy. I'm like, another project I have to go all the way to Japan to talk about.
Wow.
I don't normally work in Japan, hadn't done any projects in Japan, never been to Japan, not part of the Japan team. But I am going with Frank Wells on a jet to Japan to present this idea. As a matter of fact, when we land and we walk out the door, there are 2 cars waiting. One of them is a black limousine with a guy in a black uniform holding a sign. And the other one is a giant white stretch limo with a beautiful geisha girl Japanese lady holding a sign.
Okay.
And the limo sign says Frank Wells, and the giant stretch white limo with the geisha girl sign says Joe Rohde.
Ooh, that's the one I would have wanted.
I had flipped the signs. So I said to Frank, let's take my car. Anyway, prior to leaving on that trip, my boss had come to me and said, when you're in Japan, you probably shouldn't wear any Disney ID, because you don't look like a Disney employee, and it's just going to confuse all the Japanese. They're not going to understand, because I had lots of hair, long hair at this time. And I wore all kinds of piratey stuff. But I'm thinking, wait a minute. I've been working for this company for 7 years, So at the time I had a tiny little post earring, tiny little thing, like any guy in the 1980s who had these little tiny, I have an earrings. And so I thought, I'm going to take my Disney 5-year pin, the old 5-year pin, and put it through my ear. This is a motif, by the way. The way to get me to do what you want me to do is not to tell me what to do. That is not a successful way to get me to do what you want me to do. So I put this 5-year pin through my ear, but it was beautiful too. The old pin was really gorgeous, had a garnet and gold. I think it was real gold wash. It looked great. Anyway, it's in my ear. It's a lapel pin. I'm in Japan for 2 weeks. By the time I take it out, that hole is bigger. And so I'm like, ooh, I'm going to like be like a pirate and get earrings and stick them in. And, and that just made it bigger. And so right around this time, like 1987, I made up my mind that I would deliberately cultivate this National Geographic ear. And anytime I went to a country that I had never been to before, I would look for some ethnic tribal earring and I'd stick it in my ear, right? Except that year, for multiple reasons, both my personal travel life and my professional travel life totally changed. So within 2 years, I had this ear that looked like National Geographic. And then I had people it turned into another whole thing of like, oh, that's the guy, that's that earring guy, and I would be in some country and some Maasai tribal person be, oh, you have to have this earring. I know, my grandpa has earrings like that. So I have this huge collection. Heads of state would give me earrings at the end of some presentation. So I have like bowls of earrings at home. And now it's like a logo. It's like you have some famous celebrity friend that you're always with, I don't think, this is just some old guy. Right? That could be anybody walking down the street. But as soon as you go, oh, that's the guy, that's that guy, that's the earring.
Right. Yeah,
anyway.
It's a signature thing.
Wow.
That's amazing.
So 1990,
Yep.
Michael Eisner has this idea for this animal thing.
I want an animal poncho.
Yeah. Well, that was weird too. I had reached a point where I really wanted something I was clearly in charge of. I am clearly in charge of this thing, right? Arrogant, because I had only previously been in charge of the Adventurers Club, which had a budget about the lighting budget for one land at Animal Kingdom.
Yeah, wow.
So, but I need something that I can be in charge of so I can demonstrate whether or not I am capable of doing this. I go to Marty, and Marty and I always had this odd kind of, because again, I'm not like an on-brand kind of character, right? And I don't know how to follow all these protocols. I'm always getting in trouble. I'm always getting scolded, and I'm always frustrating him. And this is another one of these where I go in and go, look, I really want a job I can be in charge of, and I'm about to leave to go to Nepal for 6 weeks. So not only do I tell him this, I then leave for 6 weeks. I come back from Nepal, and he goes, okay, this is what I got. First of all, remember, the glorious thing here is this guy. You have to picture this guy, Marty Sklar, constantly thinking, what is it with this kid? I want to slap him upside the head so bad. Never fires me, always gives me work. I mean, the tolerance and faith that there's something going on is really remarkable, more remarkable than, oh, this is my favorite person. That's not that. It's like, no, there's something worth investing in here. But man, it makes me crazy sometimes, right? That's what is going in his head.
Yeah.
So he puts these 3 projects in front of me. One of them is a funded 5-year project to do all the renewals for Epcot Center. Another is one of Michael Eisner's other scrammy ideas. And then there's this animal thing. And I'm like, oh, I'll take the animal thing. And Marty's like, you just can see his face like, kid, I got a 5-year project. It is funded. It is on the business plan. It's going to be done. I'm giving you this thing. It's gonna be done. Epcot renewals, you would be in charge of conceptual development for Epcot renewals. I'm handing you this, and you make me crazy, and I'm handing you this. And you're taking this animal thing, which is never gonna happen, right? Well, no, I want the animal thing. So I walk out the door with this animal thing that nobody knows what it can be, and Michael Eisner has these cryptic, like 3-word sentences. People love the Magic Kingdom, they would love the Animal Kingdom. And, people love Disney and people love animals. So if Disney did an animal thing, people would love that. The end.
Wow.
The end.
Yeah.
So once again, this is not a pre-sold project. This is just like everything else I've been working on. It's like, this might not ever happen, but it's not gonna not happen because we have a bad idea.
Right.
That's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Right? So I got a very tiny team of people together, which gives me a very, very low burn rate. If you don't know what a burn rate is, how quickly you're using money, right? So we don't have that much money.
Yeah.
But we're 4 people. And so this money goes forever, 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 forever. This money keeps going. And we're able to study, and we're able to research, and we're able to call people on the phone and build a body of knowledge so we can make a rational proposal of what it might be. And by the way, none of these people are famous Imagineers either, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're all just liberal, artsy, fartsy, theatery kind of people. And that's kind of this little group of people. And so because of the burn rate, which was so low, it was painless to let us keep going. So we kept going until the idea was competitively fleshed out, where people realized, hey, wait a minute, you could build this. This could be done. This could be done.
So what was, everybody knows that you took all these amazing trips, and we're all jealous because you got to do that. But what was the benefit, do you think, of spending that money and going on these trips?
Yeah, that's a really important thing. I think this is one of the problems in how you appraise relative value across relative time, when you spend money and what you spend it on. So one of the reasons these trips were so controversial, because, Disney does research trips. The Epcot people did research trips, right? But they tended to happen much later in the project cycle, certainly after capital authorization generally. And generally their purpose was to collect design details to support design intention. We were going to take trips to determine design intention. These are fundamental research trips. What is Africa even at all about that we could ever begin to conceptualize? So people were like, it was hard to sell the trip at first, because people are, why are you going now? It's too early. Why are you going now? But this is the value of this is unbelievable. The lubrication, the exposure, remember, we're in the business of designing real places. The places we design are not movies, they're not books, they're not plays, they're physical, real places. And what makes them work is physical, real things. And so in order to make them, you need the experience of physical, real things. In some cases, the visual quality of a place is not its primary characteristic. It's some other quality that you will never know if your only experience of that place is pictures. So you take your core leadership group and you expose them, right? And when they come back, this is where, okay, so you spend, let's be clear, sometimes a lot of money to take 5 people to Africa costs a lot of money until you start saving that money on the speed of design. You save that money on the lack of iteration of changes in design because people know what they're doing. You save that money on reaction time when you have to triage and you can't afford to do the first thing you have to do. You have to do a second thing. And people go, well, remember when we were looking at that building and we saw that thing, what about the other building? That other building's completely simple. We'll just do it like that. And then you keep saving because you're building a bank of experience. Each trip banks up and banks up and banks up until you have people saying things like, remember that time when we were in Italy and we were in that plaza in Italy? Okay, so this thing that we're going to do in Nepal, this Nepalese thing, it's the same size as that plaza in Italy. And so the buildings can be the same size relative to the viewer. And that's really small. That's not a very big space, blah, blah, blah. And this just speeds and speeds. And so the money that you're saving is orders of magnitude more valuable and timely than the money you spent on that trip. I mean, can you imagine on a construction site, 5,000 people working away, cranes, trucks, and contracts, and somebody stroking their chin? Well, I don't know. Let me take a couple days and we'll draw up something new over here because I can see that's not good. Crazy money. Crazy money. Instead of going, no, do this, get rid of that, seal that up, put a thing like that over here. It looks like this. That's going to look just as authentic. I know because I was there.
Yeah.
Right? Like that.
Yeah. So Joe, earlier, we were talking about that sense of authenticity that you brought to everything. And quick little story, when you opened up Asia, and I went and visited for the first time, I walked in, and the first thing that struck me, and I don't even know if other people really would notice those kinds of things, but it was the power lines that you created that are just like this rat's nest of all these. And I had, because I was working in Japan, I had traveled a lot in that kind of world, and that's kind of typical over there. But that's not the kind of thing you see in books or you see in movies or in a theme park.
Right.
But the first thing I go, and that just like, I mean, it brought me to that place. It was real. I was really in that place because that one little detail. Amazing.
It is remarkable. I mean, when we opened Everest, we had like I have friends that are mountaineers, Sherpas, people from Nepal. So they were streaming all these people through. And I remember one guy, I think it was Ed Besters, who was a famous mountaineer, who walked into the queue and all he could talk about was this very, very particular drinking glass. It's a very specific drinking glass sitting on the desk. And he's just like, it's that thing of like, oh my God, it's like I've been swept through time and space. It's the only one it could be, is the one that it is. I must be there because the only other place in the world that is there. And there it is. You know what I mean? But you don't know that if you don't know it.
Right.
You put some funky goblet with gemstones on it. Other thing you saw in a movie. So it's fantastically valuable.
So I want to talk real quick.
Go ahead.
You started out in Hawaii, and then around 2011, you got to do a resort.
I was brought in on Aulani about the 50% drawing review to kind of get it to really help work with the Hawaiian advisory group on the Hawaiian-ness, make sure that it was Hawaiianly Hawaiian. It's very, very easy to get off the mark again because so much visual information has been produced that conflates Hawaiian stuff with Polynesian stuff. And from a distance, if you aren't one of those people, that might be some big category, but very particularly, Hawaii is particularly unique. It is so far away from all those other places. It's very much not the same aesthetic. So you have to know. You have to know how to ask questions. You have to know how to listen. You have to sit and listen. You have to know how to enlist people so that they want to contribute. And how far can you go? What is the actual core Disney thing that has to be defended? And how much else can I trade away to get this thing to feel Hawaiian that is not core, right? So that means you have to know the core, right? You have to know what you can trade off. We don't have to have that. I know we always do that. We don't have to have that. We don't have to have that. It doesn't need to be like that. It doesn't need to be like that. It does need to be like this. We cannot trade that, right? So you do that, and really that work, what makes that place so interesting is how much it was done by Hawaiians. It is not us doing something about them. It's their stuff, their ideas, their work, their art, their direction on how that place is the way it is. It's a very, very weirdly Hawaiian 15-story beachfront hotel. Weird, right? But it was one of my favorite experiences because it has real world impact. You know, the conservation program for Animal Kingdom also has real world impact.
What were the real world impacts at Aulani?
Well, because it changed the conversation in Hawaii about how you need to deal with resorts and indigenous people and Hawaiian voices. Let me be clear. This was a resort about the idea that indigenous Hawaiians define the experience of Hawaii for the visitor, not just Hawaiians, not people from Hawaii, indigenous Hawaiians. That's a radical statement, right? And that had impact. I mean, still, we had, I was told, I can't prove this, but I was told we had the first Hawaiian language requirement ever made for a resort in Hawaii.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
There are Japanese language requirements and all kinds of other language requirements. Nobody had a Hawaiian language requirement until we opened, and we had several.
Yeah.
So weird, right? Not what you'd expect from, if you go back to the superficial physical thing, it is a 15-story beachfront hotel. I submit to you that if you're going to buy beachfront land on the island of Oahu and recover your investment running a hospitality business, it's going to be 15 stories tall, because you need that many rooms to recover just the purchase of the land, right? It's going to have a lobby. It's going to have a big pool for families. It's going to have a private pool for grownups. It's going to have a big buffet restaurant for families. It's going to have a nice private restaurant for the night when the kids are in the room. It's going to have daycare. It's going to have a spa. It's going to have all those things, which Aulani has all those things.
Yeah.
So programmatically speaking, it's just like every other hotel. It has all the things a hotel has to have. What makes it not feel that way, all the way back to very beginning of the conversation we had today, is the idea that underlies it. What is it about? What do I sense about this place when I walk in the door that almost immediately tells me, whoa, wait, this is not what I expected. This is important, because so much design today is driven by exactly the opposite premise, which is, what do you expect?
Yeah.
What has our research told us you expect? Let's do that.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about this in interpersonal terms, is like the creepiest, worst date you have ever been on. You know, like, well, what would you like to eat? You know,
Right.
I don't know. I like this. Oh, where would you like to sit?
Right.
You know, what would you like to do after dinner?
Yeah.
You know, what shirt would you like me to wear? It's like, this person is freaking me out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is not a person I want a relationship with.
Right.
I want a relationship with a person who has something to say.
Right. Exactly.
Say something so I know who you are.
Right.
Right.
So
Don't
speaking
go
of that,
asking
well,
me a bunch of questions. It's freaking me out.
Yeah. So
And then I don't know who you are. I don't know.
You have this mythological casting as, you know, this firebrand and, you know, rebel and all these things. Is that really who you are?
I'm not. I am totally not that guy. I would never have been able to do any of the things that I do if I was that guy. I have a bunch of things to say about that.
Yeah.
Number one is, if you want to do this kind of big, if you want to go paint in your garage, like I'm doing now, I can paint anything I want. As long as I can afford to buy canvas and paint, I can do whatever I please.
Right.
But if you want to spend $1 billion, other people have opinions about $1 billion.
Right.
And a lot of those people, they're really smart, and they are smart about things you are not smart about.
Right.
So number one, these projects are ensemble projects, and these so-called bean counters are part of the team, right? And what they know how to do really well is count those beans, and you want those beans. So I suggest you not call them bean counters, because they don't like it. Treat them with respect, listen to what they have to say, and try to find a way to creatively respond to the restrictions that are natural in a way that is surprising. That's as good as it gets. That's as good as it gets. So that's one, is you have to remember that if you intend to work at this scale, you are working with other people, and those other people are on the team. Number two is this thing about the rebel. This should be self-evident. If you cast yourself as a rebel, that means someone else is in charge. You're the rebel.
Right.
So that means there's some boss somewhere. No. You are the boss. Abraham Maslow says you are the boss. Creative people at the top of the hierarchy of human development, you are the boss. This rebel thing is a label. It's a label applied to creative people by other people. And when you behave like a rebel because you've been labeled as a rebel, that is profiling. You have been profiled. And you are now acting out the profile that other people have applied to you.
Right.
If you expect people to trust you with vast amounts of money, time, and responsibility, That's not the rebel. That's not that person. That person is in a scruffy hideout somewhere with a band of brothers and sisters doing something. That's great. Do that. That's a thing, right? But you can't have that if you want to have the capacity to do these giant things. You need to walk in like, I am the president. I am the president of this project. I am bringing stability, reliability. I am bringing reassurance. I'm going to get this thing done, but I am the creative guy. So when it's done, it's going to surprise you, but it's going to get done. It's going to be rational. This is how I'm going to solve my problems. This is, I know the problems. Here they are. I'll tell you. You don't need to have to tell me. I will tell you what's wrong with this idea. This, and this is what's wrong. And here's how we're going to solve it. Remember, no one's going to give you money. If you went and asked a friend of yours for $1,000, how many people would give you $1,000? Right. They're certainly not going to give you $500,000, and they're not going to give you 500 million. People invest that money. So you are proposing an investment. You're trying to say to people, I promise you that if you invest this money with my organization called a project team, you will see a return on your investment because of X, Y, Z, right? That's a pitch. Not, isn't it cool? Wouldn't it be cool if there was a whole Zeppelin, right, and it flew from city to city and it just landed? No, that's not a pitch.
Right.
Sorry, that was a little.
No, you have to speak their language and use their logic and come at it from their perspective.
Yeah, this is another thing. As creative people, what appeals to us about a project is usually its unique departure from form. That's what makes it interesting, that it's new and it's unique. But usually that is a very small subset of the totality of the project. And it may in fact be something you don't even need to talk about, right? You know that it's unique. You don't need to talk about it. But when you are talking to an audience, like let's just say you're talking to business people. And remember, if you're talking, they're in the room because they also want to do something creative. And you're in the room because they think you're creative already. That's not where their anxiety comes from.
Right.
Our anxiety comes from thinking that you are also crazy. You are creative and you are crazy and untrustworthy.
Right.
So your number one job in the room is not to convince them that you are creative. You're in the room because they think you're creative.
Right.
Your number one job is to convince them, I am not crazy. I am trustworthy. You can trust me. I will bring this home. This is cool. It is interesting. It is new. It has not been done before. It has not been done for this reason. This is a solvable reason. Here's how we're going to solve it. That's why it's going to take this long. Here's how much money I need to get to the point where I know if it's feasible or not. Beyond that point, it's going to blah, 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 blah. That's how you get someone on board. Wouldn't it be cool? Of course it would be cool. Yeah. It would be cool, all kinds of things would be cool. We could buy the island of Sicily and, turn it into a dinosaur park. That would be cool. But is anyone going to do that? I don't think so.
So Joe, ex-CEO Bob Chapek kind of summed up what you just talked about.
Yeah.
Tell me what he said, because I think it was perfect.
It was great. Bob Chapek was introducing me at an event to another executive. This is Bob Chapek. And Bob Chapek says, this is Joe Rohde. Let me tell you how Joe Rohde works. First, he's going to come into the room with some kind of universally valid intellectual proposal, like a value system. And he's going to get everybody to buy into that value system. Then he's going to show how that value system would show up if it was built as a series of potential things. And then he's going to show how his particular idea matches both the physical delivery and the core idea. So by the time he's pitching his idea, there's nothing to disagree with. That was his intro. And I was like, you're actually the first guy in your position to say that out loud like that. But that is right. It's like you're building a logical proposal. Creative logic is still logic, right? There's still logic here. And this goes back around to the idea that what really gives projects strength, the home base of a project, is not its physical expression. It is what it is about.
Right.
You can trade back almost to zero as long as you don't forget what it is about. Because that's how you trade, right? It's like you have to know, where is the core? How am I saying what this is about? So I know things like this restaurant, the restaurant could be anything. That restaurant could be made of cardboard. It doesn't matter. What matters is that mountain. That mountain matters. That tree matters. The texture on this pavement matters. The width of the pavement does not matter. This light matters. That one does not matter, right? This has to be scripted. None of this other stuff needs to be scripted. As a matter of fact, that doesn't need to be said at all. You have to know these things, right? And you can't know them by knowing physically what it is, because then it's all about what it is.
Right. No,
it has to be about, what does it say? And how am I going to say that? If someone comes and says, you can't afford any of those lights at all, none of them, then you're like, okay. Then if we cannot afford any of those lights, we also don't need any of this texture, because that's what those lights were for.
Right.
We're going to cut all that texture that was going to be lit by those lights. That's going to buy us X much money, which is the lighting money plus the texture money, for lights that are now the focal element, that can be store-bought lights. They'll be like this. We'll do a geometry. It'll look really cool. But now it's going to be about the actual fixture on the wall, not this other thing that was complicated to light this texture. You have to be able to do that. And you can't do that if it's actually about the light. You're stuck on the light. You're stuck on the tower. You're stuck on some painted mural around a door, some carved statue of a duck. You cannot be there. You will never survive. You'll never.
Joe, that brings us all the way back to that whole information-based designer. Now, the time machine is telling us we're running out of juice here.
Tell us what you're doing now. You retired from Disney a couple years ago. What we heard, you're working on space tourism. Tell us.
Yeah, so I'm doing some work with Virgin Galactic to helping them define the guest experience of space tourism.
Wow.
I'm very, very involved with the Explorers Club right now. I'm doing a big initiative. I'm co-chairing this initiative with the Explorers Club to find unique explorers who would not naturally know about the Explorers Club, or that they might belong in the Explorers Club, to find them and bring them into the club, to sort of change the very definition of exploration so that the chemistry of the club itself can change. I'm doing a little bit of work pro bono with Jane Goodall, a project on the side, and then traveling a lot and painting a lot. And most of the painting, I'm trying to use my painting to raise funds. Like typically in the past, that's what I do with my art, is somebody gets something out of it. You know, Mongolia, I did the snow leopard thing. I did a fundraiser for the local arts community. That's lovely. And that's a lot. I'm busy. I'm busy. These are from that Mongolia trip, which was a few years ago. And this all went to support snow leopard conservation.
That's great.
Wow. Okay, so let's wrap this up.
So with all your great wisdom and philosophies and everything that makes Joe Rohde, what do you think makes a guest experience timely yet timeless?
Oh, I didn't get to say this. I have to say this. I think you have to be emotionally sincere.
Yeah.
Emotions override our intellect. People think too much. As much as I am a thinking person, in the end, the things we do ride on emotion. And in order to create valid emotion, you kind of have to have valid emotions. You have to feel them. And then you have to be able to say, how could other people ever feel them based on what I intend to do? Emotional sincerity is, will save almost anything. Anyway, that's my message.
Yeah.
And Joe, you've saved so much in your career. I cannot thank you enough. This exceeded my expectations as a class. Yeah, really. Thank you so much, Joe.
Oh, sure.
And you know, that Joe Rohde has been the thread through all this, going back to you in high school and all those things you learned. It was the same Joe Rohde that, went through Disney's going in outer space. And I think I hope that one of the big takeaways for young designers, find out who you are, be who you are, and be true to that and take it through whatever you do. Don't try to be Joe Rohde or whoever, be you, do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Plus, it's impossible to be Joe. There's only one Joe Rohde, that man right there.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
I would actually go. Why don't we go see what Joe does with space tourism?
Okay.
Galactic. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Okay.
All right. Oh my goodness. Stand by. But first off, we just want to say we hoped you enjoyed this ride. Oh my goodness. I know I did. Thank you so much to our longtime friend, Joe Rohde, for time traveling with us today. If you have questions for Joe, stick around for an off-the-record Q&A in just 60 seconds. We already have so many questions. I don't know how we're going to do it all. On behalf of Zeitgeist Design and Production, we thank you for spending an hour of your day with us on the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. If you enjoyed the journey, please check out our 20 time travel adventures with industry icons on our YouTube channel or under the Zoomcast section at zeitgeist-usa.com. And please plan now to join us on Friday, February 17th, when our passenger will be legendary auto animatronics guru, Garner Holt. May your tomorrow have the nostalgia of the past, the wonderment of the present, and the promise of the future. Hold tight, we'll be right back.
Get it.